Yeah, we're live. It is, I'm even early, 6:56, before 7 o'clock. Win for me and for you guys if you show up. Today we're going to talk about power adders on a Honda B Series engine, like I like to do on different combinations, is we like to try all of that stuff. I mean, when I have a motor on the dyno and have access to it and everything's ready, I can do lots of different testing. In this case, this is not one testing on a single motor, but testing on lots of different motors, or at least on a couple of different motors. I ran a bunch of Honda stuff back in the day when VORTECH had their 901 dynos. It didn't have a directional vane, so you could move the load cell over and spin the dyno in reverse and still run reverse rotation motors. So I did a bunch of B series tests. I'm sure I'm the only guy that ran Honda stuff. But I do like Honda motors. I have lots of experience with them. I've written books on them, raced them professionally and set land speed records. So I've done lots of that stuff. So I want to talk about how well they respond. And guess what? Here's the secret. They respond very well, just like every other motor. But I ran tests with nitrous. We ran tests with a VORTECH supercharger. And we also naturally ran it with a turbo because it's a Honda motor, so you got to run it with a turbo. And not surprisingly, it worked very well on all of them. It responded to all of them. I got some interesting stuff here. The first one was a B16A that we ran this one on the engine dyno. And this one had the following modifications. It was a stock B16A. Internally, it had an Apex header, Apexy header, which was originally designed for a 1.8 liter Type R motor, but I found that one seemed to work best, and we ended up using that one in my Del Sol that we ran in US touring car. It had an RS Akimoto intake, basically a filter on a stick kind of thing. We put 36-pound injectors in it, and we had cam sprockets in it. Cam sprockets were set at 0 basically, and then Tom who was at VORTECH did the tuning on this thing, and run in that manner with obviously we were spinning the water pump because that one has a camshaft driven water pump. We just had water lines going to it, so no Mazir electric water pump on on the Honda, although I think that they have one. But run in that manner, our combination produced 185 horsepower and 131 foot-pounds of torque. So it did good. But there's more power to be had. So what we did then was run nitrous with it. And when we added nitrous to it, we added a Zex. I'm pretty sure that this was probably a Zex wet kit. Yes, it was. And it did well, as you might imagine, because just adding nitrous to almost anything, if you add a given amount of nitrous, meaning if you have a solenoid that flows enough, you have a certain size jetting, and you have the right bottle pressure, and you have the right amount of fuel corresponding with the amount of nitrous that you add, and then you take away the requisite timing on it. Obviously, usually that works out fairly well. And we had to do some tuning on this. But run with on our B16, adding the wet fogger nozzle in front of the throttle body so that we're injecting both nitrous and fuel into the intake manifold. This thing made the power output jumped up to 245 horsepower and 190 foot-pounds of torque, and that was with a 40 nitrous jet and a 25 fuel jet. We also played with the fuel pressure. We lowered the fuel pressure to the nitrous by itself. We used a bottle heater on this, but it worked very well. It did exactly what you would expect nitrous to do. As soon as you engage the button, it adds a bunch of power. There is more tuning that could have been had with this combination because we didn't get a nice, even, consistent gain all the way through the RPM range. And we would normally get that if everything was spot on. I don't think we spent a lot of time tuning it. Let's see, that's our power. Let's take a look at our I don't think we have our, oh, there we go. There's our lambda. Okay. So we were at 13.0 or so on the NA combination. And then with the nitrous, we went down to, upon activation, we went down to like 1150. So there's more that could be had there from that combination. We could have tuned a bit more out of it. We could have run that at 12 or something and probably had it be. And then we also could have made sure that, I don't remember monitoring bottle pressure on this. I don't remember monitoring temperature on this. This was done way back. So I don't think we had our Steve Brule patented nitrous procedure on this one. So there's more that could have been had. But it's a pretty good size shot. We gained 30% of power from adding the nitrous, and it did exactly kind of what you'd expect. So the next one was another B16. This one was run on the engine dyno. This one was all stock. It had a header on it and an air intake like this one did. But it made 146 horsepower at the tire NA, and this was run in my Del Sol. I think you could kind of see a picture like right there, kind of. You can see a picture of that. So that was originally a B16 powered Del Sol that I road raced, but we were running it on the chassis dyno out at VTEC, and this was done on a Superflow chassis dyno. Made 146 horsepower at the tire, and then we added a VORTECH centrifugal blower that also had an intercooler, so centrifugal blower driven off of the crank, and with a transfer shaft actually. And run at 7 pounds, the power output jumped to 231 horsepower. And then we ran it again with a pulley change to try to make 10 pounds, because that's a test that I did, and that video is up. I have tests or a video on that where we ran turbo, a centrifugal supercharger, and a Jackson Racing positive displacement supercharger, and to show the difference that all the forms of forced induction. So that video is up. You can take a look at that. But the thing I want to point out is when we ran the different boost levels, so we went from 7 pounds to 10 pounds by doing a pulley change, and obviously we retuned that, and it had an air-to-water intercooler on it. We had good gas in it, so we didn't really have to worry about timing and stuff. The interesting thing is that it did pick up power, so it picked up 25 or 6 horsepower from the added boost. But the thing that's interesting, and this is a conversation I have with guys that are wanting to do I'm going to spin this blower up and wastegate it and make a bunch more low-speed power. This thing didn't start making more power until about 4,500 or 5,000 RPM. So the people that think that they're going to get really big gains down low from adding pulley to a centrifugal supercharger haven't done the math on how much of a gain you get down there. You get those big gains on a positive displacement blower when you increase the blower speed. But on a centrifugal, what you get is more power out at the top, but not big gains down low. And then wastegating it to clip the power at the top is not an ideal situation. It doesn't turn a centrifugal blower, which I tend to like, and had one on my Mustang for a long, long time. It's not going to take a VORTECH supercharger, again, which I like, and turn it into the thing that a turbo does. That's just not going to happen, or a positive displacement blower. Then we ran a turbo, and when we ran the turbo, this was a 2-liter motor. This is the motor that I used would end up using for my land speed car. We went 226 in the Civic, and we did testing with it at different boost levels. And the 2-liter was a modified motor. It had cams and ported heads, and it was just under 2 liters to fit in the class that we ran it with at Bonneville. I think it had skunk, probably Pro 2s or something. Skunk 2 intake. Yeah, it had skunk cams in it, the stage 2s, and a ported head, and an intake manifold. And it made 228 horsepower at the tire in the Civic. And that was with not that I don't think it matters very much, but it had the non-VTEC GS transmission that we had put a 4.0 final drive. So you got the 440, the 426, and then we went even taller gearing, if you were, to a 4.0 transmission. And that worked well. And then we put a Turbonetics turbo on it. It was a 76 millimeter. And this one was actually the one that I borrowed from Hovitz. We ran this on the engine dyno. And it made 521 horsepower at 17 pounds. And then jumped up to 670 horsepower at 25 pounds. and then 728 horsepower at 30 pounds, 29.8 pounds of boost. And that's as high as we ran it. And it, it was a good motor, and we could have gone more with more boost pressure and stuff, or we could have really done more homework really on the NA combination, so we get bigger gains at the different boost levels. But I think that's the most that I ever ran on a Honda turbo motor. Certainly on the engine dyno, that's the most power that we made. And we ran that motor on the chassis dyno a lot at different boost levels, and it never ran anywhere near that when we ran it at Bonneville. It only ran like 17 pounds, so in the 500 plus range there. And we ran it with ice water, and it was safe, and did all that because we wanted it to go out and make lots of pulls, which it did, and it set records for me and for other people. Road and Track, Sam Matani was in that car and set a record with it. And then after I sold it to John Hansen, he and and two of his sons all set records in it. So it's a good combination. But not surprisingly, all of these combinations, like every motor, responds to nitrous, responds well to a VORTECH supercharger, and responds to boost from a turbo. So all of that stuff is good. Todd, what's going on? Turbo Centra. Braden, and one of the other things I want to say today is, do you know what's even better than going out and working on your combination and getting your motor running after it's been sitting for a long time, or even maybe for the first time? You know what's even better than that is going out and helping somebody else get their thing done. And I did that today to a friend of mine that I've known for years and years, since way back in junior high probably. And so I went over and helped him with his truck. It was probably a 292. It was an inline 6-cylinder. Truck was a 63 manual trans and stuff. And I didn't really do much, just helped him get the linkage hooked. He put a new throttle or put a new carburetor on it, hooked him get the linkage and a couple of vacuum lines and fuel lines and that kind of stuff. And we played with brake clean to get it running and made sure that the fuel pump was pumping fuel and all that, and get a lot of the bad fuel out and stuff. It's just your normal kind of deal when you're dealing with getting something new running. But it's awesome, as it always is, even on your own stuff. But it's awesome to hear that thing fire up and make noise, as it were. And I always get excited when that happens, when you finally get it started and it works and decides, hey, look, I want to be alive and I want to contribute. So it's all good stuff. Getaway, what's going on? Turbo Centra was messing with a Fox and remembered what torque was. Gave it a throttle whack and release. I need to add body stiffening. Hello, they're awesome videos. First time watching live feed. Are you talking about a K24? No, the Honda stuff that I was talking about is B series, the B16, and then the other one was a B20, essentially a B18, a big bore B18. Picked up a 3500 stall for the Marrow. There you go. Anyway, could make a split screen so we can see the graphs. I can, but I have to start out doing something different than the way that I'm doing it now. What I'm thinking about is putting a big screen up behind me, and then so you can kind of see that too. Michael, I appreciate the lawnmower talk to mix up the race car stuff. So when I add the M90 to my 350 with 8.5 to 1 compression, will 91 work? Yeah, very easily. Very easily. Steve, you're the only thumbs up. I know it's showing that there's only 9 people here, and I find that really hard to believe. A thumbs up counts as 1 for me too. I know, I don't know what the deal is. It seems odd. It's just the numbers just jumped up a little bit, but a thumbs up as soon as I entered. Yeah, it just might not be tracking them as quickly as we want it to. With modest boost and timing, should be fine. Yep. Yeah, an M90 on a 350 with 8.5 to 1 is going to be fine. Now we're in the power. What about electric turbos? Does it lower the lag and make power down low? I've never seen an effective electric turbo, but if you can spin the turbo up with some sort of electric motor and it actually works, then it could provide boost whenever you want it. Trying to decide between race box and draggy. I'm familiar with draggy. I think those work really well. I'm not familiar with race box though. Keith, I'm getting here late. Kind of hoping the M90 is going to make its way onto a B or K series. Maybe a K series. Because I do have a K24 at the guys at Skunk, and I need to go get that taken care of. Compressed air supercharging. Yep, they've done that there. They didn't need nitromethane though with compressed air supercharging because the temperatures were so low. They just ran it on. They even raced their car on 87. Only 4 watching. Is YouTube broken? I know. I'm wondering what's going on. Yeah, screen back here, like a big screen behind me would be awesome. Oregon's in the house. Intake valve to exhaust valve ratio. Honda has always been surprisingly equal. Are you talking about the size of the valves? Looks like I need to get a draggy. I'm a real big fan now of the draggies, and I don't have one. I should get one. Are you listening, draggy guys? You should get that Richard Holdner guy one. But after seeing all the testing and the data that Jimmy did with his on the JSwap NSX, it's impressive and it worked really well. He took it to the track and compared it to the track, and like many people have, it worked just fine. It worked. It was like spot on basically as for what the track was providing. Only want to boost 5 pounds on a 350. Famous last words, but yeah, that's not a problem at all. LS swap the Yugo, yes. Do a head count, Bueller. There's more than 23 guys here on the chat. I mean, I don't understand. Did I miss the 4.8 video you had a chat earlier about? I couldn't have audio on. Yeah, that chat obviously is over. YouTube is giving you problems. Yeah, I'm wondering what's going on. I've never seen it that low. My wife grew up in La Canada, La Cañada, right next to Pasadena. She has a 2007 CTS-V, and a grandma now says she's a little old lady from adjacent Pasadena adjacent. The machine shop that I use for my heads that didn't put my springs on is backing out of any responsibility. Of course they are. Have you measured you need to measure what the coil bind of the spring is and what the installed height is. Once you know that, you know who's responsible for that. The back of your room looks like my garage. Yeah, the ground needs some work there. YouTube is broken, won't show me subscription page. Yeah, it seems like it's weird. Golden Eagle sleeves, are they reliable? I don't think I've used I may have used Golden Eagle way back on some of the things that we did. I'd have to go back and look and see. Honda, one of my friends since had a 1.6 Type R from a Civic Type R, a B18 or a B16B. Yep. Only in Japan with 10.5 to 1 compression. You put a turbo on it. Those are good. Those are very desirable, which seems odd because they're a B16 with a little bit higher compression, and Civic Type R cams, which are not as big as the Integra Type R cam, I don't think. But they made decent power though. Stick shift LS 408 stroker. You think a 92 102 will spool all right? It will spool all right for track use. But is that what you're trying to do? That's not the turbo I'd pick for a street one. Trying to justify getting HP tuners MP VI3, especially since I don't do engine or car building for a living, or if I should send the 07 GMT 800 ECM to someone to have it flashed. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think it would be hard for somebody to flash something. I mean, it's easy to flash, but to know all of the stuff that's in your vehicle and your engine combination. I want the Fox to tow the sensor to the track, so it needs to be mild. Yeah, that should be pretty easy, right? Mark, what's going on? Engine parameters for 5.7 with 799 heads, flat top icon pistons, Truck Norris cam 4060. Yeah, I would be very surprised if someone could do that remotely and nail it on the first try, especially with all the trans programming that has to go on for that. Got my hands on the D16A6 with the all-wheel drive wagon transmission for $100. Nice. Going in an EF hatch. I do like Hondas. I miss my Honda. Cletus McFarland had a high-end electric supercharger. They got it up to 10 or 11 pounds like that on a Cobalt. Yeah, I didn't see the electric one. I saw the one that they tried an electric one that I didn't think worked out very well, but somebody has an electric supercharger that seems to be doing okay, but it just takes a lot of power to drive it. Paris Machine Shop here in town measured that for me and said it's a stock spring that was installed in the head. So keep all of that stuff, and so I can and I will verify it. Not that I don't trust what they're doing, but if it's a but what stock spring is it? Actually, if you have a sloppy stage 2 cam, it doesn't make any difference. If it's a stock LS3 spring, that's a 550 spring. If it's a stock LM7 spring, that's a 500 lift spring. Neither of which is enough for that 585 lift camshaft. So it's definitely a coil bind problem. So a 5-cylinder Acura motor. Have you ever dealt with what? I have not. Just looking for a base tune to drive it. It will actually start up and drive on the tune that you have in the car, on the tune that you have in that computer. And I'm told that it should actually drive around and work. It's just not going to be ideal. Would you recommend Wiseco boost line rods or Cali's Extreme H-beam stock block half-inch studs, mini hoop with factory 821s, mostly street car? I guess an 88103 would do. Yeah, that would do 12 to 1300. It seems like you're doing an awful lot to make 12 or 1300. Half-inch studs? I've never used half-inch studs in anything, even on the Big Bang stuff that we did over 1500 with. We did use the CA625 stuff, which are good, but I don't know that you're stretching studs at that power level. And since you have factory heads on it, I will be more worried about the deck thickness of the factory head on all of that stuff. And you don't have to worry about any one of those rods at that power level. HP tuners, it was confusing at first. Microskirt was way easier. It's the factory ECUs have a lot of stuff that you have to adjust. Alex LTLX has built some electric superchargers. Will K24A2 bottom end handle 500 horsepower? Yes. If you're going to go boost, you should put ring gap in it. I'd like to get one of those Acura 5-cylinders. Been fighting my Supra all day. Gas got stolen. Put in some. Took to store and filled it up, and now it cuts out under the load. Changed fuel filter and fuel pump was fine for a few minutes, and then it's back. Just from the fuel getting stolen? Did they damage something else? Because the fuel shouldn't affect it like that. So Mark is saying that a universal patcher can do everything that can, except maybe data logging. Haven't tested that. Free software, $50 OBD link SX works. Software is more cluttered than HP tuners. What would half-inch studs be good for horsepower-wise? That's not something that you have to worry about. If you're using a stock block and a stock set of heads, that's your concern. It's not the half-inch head studs. Machine Shop recommended that for use. Stock heads for lifting. They also said H-beams aren't any count. I don't know what that is. Idle surging to 1800. Do you have a vacuum line off or something? Richard, can I use a turbo off a diesel motor? Yes, you can. The turbo doesn't care whether it's a gas or diesel. The only thing I can say is that depending on which turbo you choose will dictate how well it's going to work. I have a VS Racing 7875 Gen 2.5 with a 0.96, has a 3-inch exhaust downpipe. Is there any benefit to adapting it to a 4-inch for the downpipe? Yes, although what motor do you have that on with a 0.96 AR? But a bigger exhaust is better. A bigger exhaust after the turbo is better. There's a learning curve with a factory ECU, but once you learn it, you can go at it like clockwork. Yep. What ring gap do you recommend for a K24? We do 6.5 thousandths per inch of bore on anything. If I get aftermarket rods for a small buck 350, do I need to get it balanced? Yes. The aftermarket rods are definitely going to be a different weight than the stock ones are. Gary, YouTube keeps dumping you out. It's odd that the numbers are weird. No, my dogs are. So what size is it? Oh, a 373. That's probably okay then. Craftworks or VORTECH Supercharger, or are they the same deal? I know that one of those was Oscar Jackson, and I know that he was using VORTECH Superchargers. Or VORTECH, I think, is a centrifugal, and I think that Craftwork was also using that, but they may have switched. It's been a while since I looked into that stuff. Are most diesel motors smaller turbos because they don't rev? Yes, if they're designed to only feed 300 horsepower, then you might have a problem with what kind of thing that you want to put them on. It's possible to put 2 of them on there. I just updated YouTube mobile before all this, and it's running okay. Turbo Sentra, it's bedtime. YouTube viewing numbers just jumped around 7 and 40. Yeah, that's weird. I have a big cam on my 4.8. What can I do to have it running right? You need to get it tuned. The other thing that helps is a higher stall converter. I have 799 heads on my 4.8. That's not unusual. Lots of the factory ones came like that. How much kind of 0.96 air housing make? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know which one you'd reach first with that motor. My guess is you'd reach the hot side, but that's a 1,000 horsepower turbo. Texas Speed 408 rotating assembly says it needs block modifications for the stroke. I assume clearance needs to be made for connecting and rotating the block. Yeah, that's normally the problem area. My 4.8 had 862s. Yeah, they come both ways. I think all the 4.8s that have 799s or 243s, I think that those are all Gen 4 stuff. I have it tuned and big torque converter, but still not running right. I don't know what you mean by running right. It's if you have a big camshaft in it, it's going to be soft down low, and it's always going to be like that if you have a big camshaft in it. But a higher stall converter should help it out quite a bit. I think the 821s would hold at 1,200. The machine shop said H-beams will break around 800, that they recommended boost line rods for all their stuff. Well, considering the fact that we've done 1,500 with stock Gen 4 rods, I'd say that any sort of forged rod you put in there will go way beyond 400. We know stock rods will make 100 poles at 1,000 horsepower. So the 800 number for an H-beam rod is not accurate. I'm losing power at some point with a 799 heads. You would be on a 4.8. That they would not be my choice for a 4.8. How do Kenny Bell screw blowers compared to a modern high helix Eaton style blower at similar blower displacements? A twin screw is still going to be a more efficient design. You'd have to look and see what it would depend on what you're talking about. If you can make it so both blowers are exactly the same displacement and have exactly the same pulley ratio and have exactly the same inlet on them, then it would be an interesting test. My guess is, unless you're trying to spin them all the way up, I still would bet that the twin screw has a lower power consumption than the TVS does. And I would guess the charge temperature coming out of the blower would probably be a little bit less. This is a guess on my part. I can take a look and see if the guys have some testing on a 2650 or something like that on the blower dyno. They probably do. But again, the problem is you would need to make all those things exactly the same. Someone told me I'm losing compression with a 799. A 799 has a slightly bigger chamber than a 706 or an 862 head, so you are losing static compression. Richard, twin turbo 408 with rec port heads aiming for 1300. What would you recommend for head gaskets? On our Big Bang motors, we use the factory LS9 gaskets. Is it even worth doing a reverse-headed H22, meaning intake facing the front of the car like K-Series? How are you going to do that? How are you going to drive the camshafts? What do you think 80-pound Ford racing injectors can handle 800 wheel horsepower with E85? 800 they probably could do. They can't do 1,000 on E85. Yeah. It's going to be close there. I believe my LQ4 has, I'm sure you meant 317s because that's what they would have. Will it be the best choice to go with 862s or 706 heads? Those are exactly the same head in terms of power. I think an 862, the people like them because of the casting process a little bit more on that than they like on the 706. You've been thinking about swapping the 317s. Anything else that you put on there will be an upgrade in power. Any other factory head. Thanks for the blower answer. Yeah, but I also think that if there is a difference between those two, that it's a nitpicky difference, probably, maybe, and that it's not something you probably would register when you have it in the car and you're out running, unless you're running it at the absolute limit. My cam specs are 234, 239. That's a really big camshaft for a 4.8. That's why it's so soft. Have you ever tried the Summit Pro LS pistons? Yes, we've run the Pro LS pistons, and a forged piston at that power level is fine. So you need to upgrade the wrist pin for aftermarket Wiseco pistons, or would you go with the insurance and upgraded pins? Do they have 2 pins available? Do they have a thicker pin? It will make you feel better if you want to do that. But like I said, given what we've done on stock stuff, all of that stuff that you're talking about is way better than the factory stuff. Richard, how much does water temperature affect horsepower? I would think it would affect a boosted combo more because it'd be more likely to detonate. You could take a look at I have a video up on temperature where we changed the temperature of the motor to show you the change in power. But there's something to be said for more temperature with a boosted application, but that's mostly directed toward the turbo. I don't think you'll see a greater change with the turbo application with water temperature. I think you'll still see the same kind of thing. 408 Cleveland, cool. 9cc dish, piston hydraulic roller, 251 single pattern. Not sure if it would make an NA power I want without boost. Mainly interested in a 4-bolt block. So what is your question, James? So Leon, you have 799 heads with the Trailblazer SS intake manifold, LS3 throttle body, 3600 stall is the right combination. I don't know what your stock rear end is. I don't know what gearing is in it, but the camshaft's way too big for that 4.8. 2 GT45s on a J35, too much for the engine. It's not if you're wanting to make 1500 horsepower from your J35. But if you're not trying to do that, then that's you. Oh, 2 GT25s. I thought you said 2 GT45s. I'm like, wow, that's pretty adventurous. No, 2 GT25s are not too much for a J35. Watching to keep the same cam. What's my best modification should I do? You can increase the displacement of the motor if you want more low speed power. You could, everything else that you do besides changing the cam will do really, really minor things. You can change the compression. You could put a 706 head instead of the 799 head on it. You can't really do much on the intake manifold unless you put a really, really long runner manifold on it, but that's not really available. Long tube headers would help low speed, but again, not, it just has way too much camshaft. It has an 8,000 RPM camshaft in it, and it's not what you need for probably what you're doing. What duration in LSA would you recommend on a 7.5 RPM big block Ford? I don't know about the big block Ford. It would depend on way too many things. The RPM is not, I mean, you probably would need that much to make 700 horsepower. You probably need that kind of RPM on a 460 to make that. I'd have to go back and look at some of the 460 data that I have, but the camshaft is going to be big. It's going to be 270, 280, I'm sure. I think I did water temperature tests when I did the accessories also, and I think it's an accessory video. Are the 862 706 best for the 4.8? Yes, for a stock head, they're the best ones. Yeah, GT25 makes more sense than GT45s. They offer an upgraded options around 1,500 for pistons and rings. If you don't detonate the motor, you're not going to hurt those. I have a comp cam 544, 280, 288. I'm sure that that's an advertised duration. 112. Do you think that this is limiting my goal to make 750 plus? Is it 280? Well, currently the motor rate's 660 with the VORTECH tree trim, a T trim. A 280, 288 is going to be like, what motor is this on, first of all? And a T trim will make way closer to 1,000 horsepower. So we know that because I've run lots of them. So what motor is that? And we'll start with there. A turbo will make more though. Scrolling back, scrolling. I don't know what, James, what head is on that? What heads does that Cleveland have? Leon, yeah, if you go from a 4.8 to a 6-liter, that camshaft would be more appropriate. The low buck truck cams are 550 lift. Trying to make a decent reliable LS that can be beat on. I know nothing is reliable when adding boost. As long as everything's right, they're very reliable. A lot of people making it happen. Yep. Enjoying driving the GLH. I don't know. I haven't driven it for a really, really long time. 373 dart block. Don't forget the plug and play Dizzy digital distributor for Honda and Acuras. Is that a plug for something that you're selling? What does it mean to stretch a rod bolt? Well, it's exactly what it says. If you take the rod bolt and grab it on both ends and go like this and stretch it, that's what happens when you're doing that on a, sometimes with too much snatch load, usually we'll do that. Tunnel rounds are really good at mid-range power and extending up into high RPM. Tunnel rounds are really cool. They just stick out of the hoodie. 660s will not be good for fuel mileage. That's right, Dan. But you got to have 660 center squirters if you have a wine tunnel ram, though. Iron 4V heads. Are they ported at all, does it say? Stretching a rod during assembly, that's a different thing, yeah. That's a bad feeling when you do that. Or on a head bolt or a head stud. I saw the B series and you didn't do a closed deck conversion. Not on a lot of the B16s we didn't. On some of them we did, and on the motor for Bonneville it had it was sleeved and had a closed deck. Have you compared Q16 versus E85 on a turbo engine making 600 to 800 horsepower? See if one of them makes more than the other. My pick would easily be E85 over Q16 because it's $2 or $3 a gallon instead of what's Q16 now, $20 a gallon. Bonus points for sticking out of the hood. Yep. Tunnel around with a blower on top. Yep. Then 660s. There's your fuel mileage. Well, there's your problem. Q16 tends to make a little bit more than other kinds of race fuels. It's one of the tricks that we use if we're trying to get just a little bit more. But I don't think Q16 makes what E85 does. $20 a gallon. What does Q16 cost? Does anybody know? I don't know. Is there any tuning or changes required to run a mixture of nitromethane in the fuel? Yes. What's the difference between an H22 and an F22? I think the F22 is I don't have a lot of experience with that, but I think that's a single cam motor, and the H22s and the 23s were twin cam. Just get the 100 AV. I got avgas in it. Mild port job of stock sizes. BTR 8000 cam is going in the 8000. It's going in 11-to-1 6-liter rectangular ports, high ram with two 650s. That'll be good. That'll be kind of like what it was in, except not D-stroked. So it'll really make power. Just make sure that the spring combination's right. Yeah, that's a good point, Dan, that the nitromethane doesn't mix with gas anyway. You'd have to mix it with the 85 or some kind of alcohol-based deal. Trying to hide my air-to-air cooler in front of the truck. You just got to paint it the color of the radiator and stuff. It just got to be all stealthy. Just write radiator on it, and then that will trick most people. Is it better to use copper as a material for the fins in a liquid air intercooler? I don't think you see that very often. I would argue that 10 pounds on an LS can be reliable at low RPM and can be a lot of fun. Yep. We don't even have a poll. Is nobody going to talk about our poll? Come on, dudes. What's going on? Who would love to have VTEC on their LS V8? Yeah, you know, we got to do what we got to do. Put a Hyundai Motorsport sticker on the intercooler. Mishimoto. Copper heat sinks are better than aluminum, but are heavier and could be another means for galvanic corrosion. You don't see very many copper ones. And actually, if you're going down the path where you're looking at metallurgy for your intercooler rather than the big things, you're at a very high level of racing. I have a dual fuel system, so I don't buy a whole lot of Q16. I only inject Q16 above 12 psi. It returns a 93 under that. That would be helpful, but E85 is a lot cheaper, and you could make as much power or even more power on E85. I would argue. Q16, maybe if I was going for the maximum kind of thing, like we do on these, if I was doing 1500 or 2000 or trying to go to the moon, I might do something that has more octane than E85 does. I probably would just go to methanol, honestly. Anyone voting no is lying. I agree. The ability to instantly switch between a high and low cam profile is what makes Honda so good. Yeah, and then you add in variable cam too to that mix and a dual runner intake manifold. All that's good. VTEC runs on oil pressure. Yeah, it uses oil pressure to push a plunger that activates the secondary rocker. Got my MS3 Pro Evo turbocharged 4-liter Jeep Cherokee running good. I need to finish the transmission Thursday or Friday so I can get it tuned over the weekend. It should make at least 460 horsepower, 550 foot-pounds. That's a lot, man. What did you do to your 4-liter Jeep? I was relating PC parts to auto parts. Yeah, and if you can make the system smaller, sometimes there are different options for that. But if that was a viable thing for automotive stuff, then I'm sure we would see that. Big Chevys do not require reline honing when switching to main studs. I think that that's incorrect. I think that anything when you switch to main studs, when you do that, I bet it changes the bearing clearance. I bought your book last week. Which one? Currently adapting a GSR IAB intake onto a non-VTEC B20 Z2. I don't know what you mean by the word thoughts. Gary Hartwig, you should get a second opinion. I like the 93-85 mixes are neat. 50-50 is good. E85 is great stuff. And I'm also, though, a big fan of, and I did this in my Mustang, I'm also a big fan of running cheap gas. I run 87 in my truck everywhere I go. The only time I ever put 93 in it is I would put that in when I was towing the boat and we were going up to hills and stuff. As it turns out, I didn't really need to do that because my knock sensors were activated, so I had all the timing taken away. Hunter, first-time builder, building an LQ4 to put in a full-size truck. Awesome choice. Scam suggestions. Plan on using 706 heads from the 5.3. daily with a light tow. I have 2 cams, either which of you can choose between either one of those. It would work really well. I have a low buck truck and then one that's slightly bigger. One's a 212, the other one's a 219 cam. For a 6-liter, either one of those would work. I might, with a 706 head on there, I might pick the 219 cam. But do you have a stock converter? And is this a 4L60E trans? I couldn't get you all the information on the Cleveland. That's okay. I wouldn't really have a guess on that anyways. I don't have a lot of Cleveland data. I could give you some kind of guess. I don't know how accurate it is. Ported intake, Edelbrock head, and a comp cam with 14 PSI. Oh, on your 4-liter. Okay. I got to put those together. I forgot that Edelbrock makes an aluminum head for that. That's kind of cool. Is the Edelbrock head significantly better than the factory head? It's 15 pounds of boost for 10-to-1 compression on E85. That's fine, because really timing is going to be your question about that anyway, and not boost and compression, or timing is going to be also a big factor there. Dan, you think all the Chevys require a line honing? I don't put a lot of, other than when we're first building them, and then we do that as a, we do that as one of the first steps, but I don't remember putting like main studs in a lot of stuff. I haven't done it on hardly any LS motors. We didn't do it on any of the Big Bang stuff. We just used the factory stuff. Is VTEC better than the GM stuff? Well, nobody else has VTEC like Honda does. And VTEC uses multiple cam profiles, so it's really, really good. I've used studs on big block Chevys for years. I've been lucky multiple times, never had any main bearing issues. Cool. Maybe it's more of a guideline than a rule. Can you test the 80 Seville EFI intake? It has no runners. I haven't looked at that. I'll have to look at that and see what it is. If it doesn't have any runners, it's not going to be very good. I can tell you that right now, because I've tested lots of blower manifolds that have essentially no runner length, and they would do very well at very high RPM, but they're terrible down low. Stock converter 6L80. Okay, 2009 1500. I kind of would like to see that. I haven't seen this low buck truck cam or a truck Norris installed in a 6-liter with a stock converter, but on a 6-liter should not be any problem at all. But I wonder about the 219 cam, if that would still work with a stock converter on a 6-liter. Edelbrock head flows more and bumps the compression. Both of those are good things. Anthony, oh, so you don't have a PayPal, but your buddy did. He hooked you up. That's good. That's a good way to go. Have you ever done anything with the Volkswagen VR6 engines? I have not. Some of the Cadillacs had, I can't remember which one it was, with it 4.1 or something, that had the GT40 looking intake manifold with the tubes on it. The VR6. I have not done anything with those. I've watched a few videos of those making lots of power with turbos and stuff, but I've never run one. I don't think I've ever even run one of those on the engine dyno. Yeah, it's a real narrow angle V. Cadillac Alante had the tube intake. That's my dad had one of those. My stepdad had one, and that's maybe where I saw it because he had an Alante. I saw a video this morning. It literally goes right into a plenum rated at 180 horsepower. Wonder how high RPM power peak would be. Well, it's not going to be very high because the effective RPM range of no runner length is going to be beyond where the camshaft and the head would actually want to make power. So it's never going to get there. It's just not going to be very effective. Richard, you going to have shirts for sale at the LSS? Probably not now. Have you ever tested different octanes to see if on a stock engine, see if it affects power? It didn't when I tested it. We tested 91, 100, and 112. The 100 was a little bit better, but it was oxygenated. So it doesn't, the octane really doesn't affect power output other than allowing you to add the things that would change power. Yeah, the Alante intake, yeah. I'd like to fool around with the Phaeton W16, 2 VR8s on one block. Yeah, that's cool. 2-minute warning. 80. What's our poll? Would love to have VTEC on their LSV8. There's really 20% of people that are thinking, nah, I don't want that. I don't want my production cam and then my Super Richie cam all in one thing. That would be terrible. That would be awful. I think awesome is the word there. That would be magnificent. Yes, everybody do like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. We do have almost as many thumbs up as we have people, which just seems odd. I wonder if people are not liking the Honda motif. Apparently they made a VR5. Kyle, you want to test with the turbo as close to the exhaust manifold as possible? What are you thinking that the response rate is going to be better there? Mohammed, you want to limit oiling to the bearing? I don't recommend that. That was the 20%. Yeah, exactly. I can still remember my buddy Bernie and I in our shop looking that up. This is way back in the late 80s or something. Thinking, it's going to do what? It's going to use a plunger and switch over to another rocker set, and yeah, that's never going to work. What Honda spin reverse rotation? B doesn't a D also spin reverse rotation? Everyone wanting to change their cam, do yourself a favor and do a higher stall converter. Even a stock engine will benefit from a stall converter. Everything before K is counterclockwise. It's a rotary valve, so I want to limit oiling to only the bearings there and make another line to the heads. Okay, you can block the hole. You can drill and tap it for a restrictor. There's a couple of ways you could do that. I'm old and I love Pontiacs. Okay, and I cannot lie. J series and F spin normally. I think that they do. I think that the S2000 and the V6 stuff is standard rotation. Yeah, you just got to look at what side the transmission's on, right? I know. I was thinking about a way to reverse that, but it was not feasible. We wanted to run a different transmission on a different motor and see if it was going to work. Older Pontiac guy. Yeah, all Pontiac guys are older Pontiac guys. Do we have newer Pontiac guys? I don't think I need to block the hole, but the idea is if I can reverse the bearings, do you think it will work? If you cover up the hole, it should cover it up. It should not flow oil. Transverse front-wheel drive cars weird me out. Have you ever seen Cadillac front-wheel drive big blocks that were longitudinally mounted? What year were those? Unless it's Mitsubishi where they run an idler shaft in the transmission to get it to not have 5 reverse gears. Yeah, that would not be as beneficial, right? So, Steve, you put a intercooler on that? That's probably a good idea. Altitude, you're 373. What intake manifold do you have on there? But a 7875 with a 0.96 on a decent 383 with a 3200 stall, you should have boost there. 70s Fleetwood. Okay. I'm 36. Do I count? Yeah, that's a younger Pontiac guy. I'm a Buick guy. For casual street hooning, how much water or water air do I need? If you look at the factory stuff to give you an idea, it's going to be a couple of gallons. Eldorados, okay. The Eldorado. Tornadoes, yeah, with the Oldsmobile stuff. The Rock Super Victor, yeah, that's not going to be ideal, right? And does it have a really big camshaft in it too? Oh, Getaway, bringing that Pontiac numbers down to 32, the 3 Deuce. 90 millimeter throttle body. Yeah, you might have to, is this a manual trans or an automatic? Did I ask it already? Can you 2-step it? Chain drive in the transmission. I remember that. Didn't they try to use that transmission on the what was Jerry Weigert's, the Vector? Didn't they try to use that transaxle in Jerry Weigert's car? 540 lift, 280, 288. Is the 280, 288 at 50? I wouldn't think with the 540 for a lift. I would think that that's an advertised number. So if that's not if it is an advertised number, that's actually not that much camshaft. A 5-gallon tank for water air. I drove it a lot on the street. When I go to the track, I fill it with 20 pounds of ice. That's good. The GMC motorhomes had front-wheel drive stuff in them too. That's interesting. I didn't know that. The blower belt poked through the firewall. That's kind of cool. And on that note, it is time to go, but I will be back tomorrow. I'm working on a video tonight. Should have it up tomorrow. A regular 10 minute or 15-minute video or whatever. Got a couple more of those now. Just lots of stuff. lots of stuff going on. I'll see you guys all tomorrow. Click and click clack.